Have you ever had a situation where the best thing you could do to improve the situation would be to change your surroundings or change your environment? I certainly have. In fact, there was a moment in my life where I had to change everything about my environment and everything about my surroundings, and it completely changed the direction of my life. So that's what we're going to talk about today, and this week the theme is going to be about change and how to handle it. Welcome back to the aha moments where every day I share the lessons I learned in my work as a psychotherapist and in my life to make a difference in your life and help you live your very best life. Welcome back to Monday. And like I said, the theme for this week is going to be talking about change. Change is something that's difficult to manage. Ironically, like I sit on a board and, this organization, this board I sit on, it's going through a lot of changes. This was a board that needed to increase diversity. It needed to increase access. It needed to change in the way the organization was operating. And there's someone, not actually affiliated on the board, but like affiliated with the board, that is having a very difficult time dealing with change. And it's making this person anxious. It's making this person behave in ways that are incongruent to their very best self. And it just has me thinking about the importance of change and how when you can just embrace and accept change, even if it's scary, it can completely change your life. So for me, let me talk about the moment that changed my entire life. Growing up in Massachusetts was both amazing and hard. I had really good friends. I, to this day, love Massachusetts, and Boston is among my favorite cities. But I really did have some trying experiences there in my own kind of family of origin. It was not all roses and sunshine for me. And without going too detailed into it, there was a lot of abuse that happened, and there was a lot of mental consequences that happened for me dealing with that. And I spent a lot of my mid to late teenage years very suicidal. And then my mom decided to move. Massachusetts became a place where we couldn't live anymore. My mother's mental health, as a consequence of being around my dad, was too impacted. And as a family, as a whole family, like my mother's sisters and brothers and her mother decided that she needed to get out of Massachusetts. And eventually my mother decided to move to Texas. She had a sister she was very close to in Texas, and Texas would be where she lived. My younger brother was in high school at the time. My older brother was already out of the nest, kind of living his life. And I was 1 year into college. When I found out my mom was moving, I wrestled back and forth about what I should do. Should I transfer to a school to be closer to my mom? Should I just stay on my own path? And I can remember thinking, if I just stay here doing what I'm doing, I'm going to keep having what I'm having. If I agree to change my surroundings, something different will happen. Now, I'm not psychic. I didn't know if that difference would be good or bad, but I knew I needed a change because I wasn't happy in the environment in which I lived. My life appeared to be happy, like I was in college and, I had a girlfriend and life was life. But I wasn't happy. And in fact, I was extremely depressed and dealing with suicidal thoughts. And I'd visited Texas once as a child, but never for an extended period of time. There were no thoughts that Texas would be this great future for me. So I wrestled for a few months about what I could do. I remember my best friend Kyle and his family, they told me I could stay in their home and treat their home as my home as I continued going to college and live on campus. I had just had an amazing baseball season, and I had a realistic opportunity to continue to play baseball beyond college. I could have moved back to Chicago, where I was born. I could have moved. This was a real kind of turning point for me in my life. I ultimately decided I'm going to move to Texas because it was the one place where I couldn't predict the outcome. If I moved to Chicago around family, I could have predicted that outcome. If I stayed in Massachusetts, I would have just kept experiencing what I was experiencing. I could predict that outcome. But Texas, I couldn't predict the outcome. I had no idea what my life would look like if I went to Texas. And that's ultimately why I decided to go. It was the best decision for me because I got away from the distractions of Massachusetts. I was able to address my mental health. I was able to eventually continue. After about a year, I was able to continue my college studies. and got a bachelor's degree and a master's degree and built a career and all these things, none of that would have happened. I'm confident to tell you I wouldn't have a bachelor's degree, master's degree, or this career had I stayed in Massachusetts. And the reason I'm telling you this story is sometimes you have to lean into the uncomfort. Sometimes you have to choose the scariest path because it's the one where you don't know the outcome. In any environment or any situation where you don't know the outcome, that's an environment where you have the highest ability to influence it. Right? So any place where you can't predict the outcome is a place where you have the highest ability to influence that outcome. And we have to use our influence to make our lives better. So that's the lesson I want you guys to take from this is those scary things that are unpredictable, they're just unpredictable because they're uncomfortable. They're not bad. And those are the times where you can have a great influence on your environment and make a true difference in your world. I was 19 when I did that. And at 45, I look back and I'm so thankful to what that 19-year-old did because I wouldn't be sitting here doing what I'm doing now if not for the bravery of that 19-year-old. So think about things in your life that are scary, uncomfortable, and look for those unpredictable pathways and find the courage to do the unpredictable because that's where your life is greatest opportunity to change. Thank you so much for being here today. If you wouldn't mind, please do me a huge favor and share this podcast on your social media platforms or with at least one person you think could benefit from hearing this message today. And don't forget to subscribe. You can do that on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Anchor, wherever you listen to your podcast. And I can't wait to see you tomorrow. Today I want to talk to you about how important it is in your career to be open to change and to be able to adapt to the environment that is going on in your work life. Throughout my career, so many people have been anti-change or against change. And today I want to talk to you about why it's so important to be open to change and flexible and adaptable and how being that way can help you achieve so much success. Welcome back to the Aha Moments. I'm your host, Elliott Connie, and this is where I share everyday lessons that I've learned in my work and in my life to inspire you to live your very best life. And today I'm super excited because I think this topic is so important, and it's one of the main reasons I've been able to achieve the successes that I have. So let's go back to the early parts of my career, and I want to talk to you about how it started to how it's going now and how being open and adaptable allowed me to really take off in my career. So the first job I had in this career was I worked at a community mental health agency in Fort Worth, Texas. And working at that agency, we were heavily funded by Medicaid. And Medicaid was constantly changing the rules about billing, changing the paperwork. When I say constantly, I mean monthly. And sometimes we'd go to a staff meeting and the director would tell us about these changes and people would get super upset. And in my head, I was like, why are you getting upset about something you can't control? You need to just adjust. Like if they're telling you a new bit of paperwork to do, just do it. Or a new different way of doing billing, just do it. Because there's no point in getting frustrated because you still have to do it. So in my mind, you can do it with just have to do it or do it while being frustrated. But it was really important that people just had to do it. So that was when I first started noticing how people were reluctant to change. And it was actually like a lesson for me because I really didn't anticipate that so many people, especially in the helping professions, would be against change. But I want to take you to a more profound moment in my life. I eventually started writing books in the field of solution-focused brief therapy. That's the type of therapy that I'm known for doing. And traveling around the world giving lectures. And around 2015, late 2015, I started thinking about hosting my own events. And then shortly after that, doing events online. And there were people in this field that were so furious that I was doing things online. They would send me emails accusing me of devolving the field and discrediting the work because you can't do the work online. And if you're trying to teach psychotherapy online, you are discrediting the work that we do. I mean, they went in. My assistant at the time was shocked at the level of emails I was getting and seeing the vile nature that was coming from psychotherapists. It was blowing her mind and blowing my mind. But I continued going because I have that personality. Like, if I believe in something, I'm going to pursue it. If I believe in something, I'm going to pursue it with a level of vigor and gusto. It was really, really important to me to continue down this path. And then in 2020, as we all know, in the early part of 2020, the pandemic happened. And all of a sudden, we were all forced to do almost all of our work exclusively online. And the entire field of psychotherapy scrambled to how to deliver psychotherapy services online. And educators like myself scrambled to figure out how do they keep their training businesses going. But you know who didn't scramble? Me. Because I had been online already. I was aware that the world was becoming a more digitized world even before the pandemic. Now, the pandemic obviously accelerated that, 1,000 times. But the evidence was already in that the world was becoming a more digitized world. I just decided to embrace that and build a business that included online work. So when the whole world went online, my company revenue quintupled. My company revenue went up and made me the leader of $1 million company, more than $1 million company. And I don't say that to brag. I say that because in order to stay on trend, you have to be able to embrace change. You can't just sit in your laurels. You have to be willing to embrace change. I'm old enough to remember when you were able to start accepting credit cards easily in your practice. And I can remember this person that I know that was like, I'm never accepting credit card. And this is back in 2008, 2009, maybe as late as 2010. They had come up with this thing called Square, and you could accept credit cards on your phone. And this person was like, I'm never accepting credit cards. And I asked them why. And they said, because at the end of the month, someone might notice that they've spent, if they came to see me 4 times, they spent $400 on their credit card, and it encouraged them to cancel. But I was like, but credit cards are the way people are paying for things. Like, think about where we are now. How many of you haven't touched cash in a good long while? Like, that's the way of the world these days. And I think we have to just get on board with change and realize this is a changing world, and the people that are going to be successful are the ones that can embrace and adapt to change. So I want you to think about, what changes do you have a hard time dealing with in your life, in your career, in your job opportunities, and think, how can embracing change and adapting to a new world increase the likelihood that I will matriculate through my career and make myself available to that job promotion just by being open and available to change. Listen, thank you so much for being here today. If you wouldn't mind, please do me a huge favor and share this podcast on your social media platforms, or with at least one person that you think could benefit from hearing this message today. And don't forget to subscribe to this podcast. You can do that on Apple Podcasts or wherever it is you listen to your podcast. And I can't wait to see you tomorrow. So yesterday we talked about how important it is to be flexible and adaptable, and how being so flexible and adaptable will help you achieve more in your life and in your career. But today we're going to talk about the opposite thing, which is how to know when you shouldn't change or adapt, how to know when you need to hold firm to your ideals, and why that's a really important thing. And that's the topic of today's episode of my podcast. And of course, I want to welcome you back to the Aha Moments. I'm Elliott Connie, and every day I share the lessons I've learned in my work as a psychotherapist and in my life to inspire you to live your very best life. And one of the most important lessons I learned as a psychotherapist actually came in my travels, where I traveled all around the world teaching people how to do the kind of therapy that I do. And one of the places I went was to South Africa. And I was super excited to go because someone I've always admired and enjoyed and just had a tremendous amount of respect for was Nelson Mandela. And I've had a wonderful opportunity to travel all around the country of South Africa. And I've been to Johannesburg, and I visited his house in Soweto. That's the house where he lived before he was got arrested, and so that's where he was released to. I have been to the farm where he hid under an alias, David something or other. I don't remember the last name. And I've been to Cape Town, South Africa, and I visited the prison he stayed at for 17 years. And I've been to the prison he stayed at the last 9 years called Paulsmoor Prison The first prison called Robben Island. I've been to Durban, South Africa, where he was arrested. It's called the capture site, and it's where he was arrested in 1963. So anyway, I was able to spend some time kind of walking in the footsteps of Nelson Mandela. And I think Nelson Mandela is a wonderful example of what do you do when you refuse to change. And I think one of the things that's important is recognizing there are times where you're in pursuit of something larger than yourself. You're in pursuit of justice and righteousness. You're in pursuit of something that is difference-making and in your core worth paying a consequence for. And that's how you know when you're actually working on something and you don't need to change. You don't need to be flexible. You need to hold firm because what you're doing is so meaningful that you're willing to pay a consequence to achieve it. And in some cases, a high consequence. One of the reasons that I respect Nelson Mandela so much is because he knew what he was doing was likely to cost him a high consequence. In fact, when he was on trial, he gave a famous speech when he was on trial. And at the end of that speech, he said, "If I have to give my life, then I'm willing to." And his attorneys were so afraid of him making that statement, they asked him not to make it. But he was trying to make the point that I am willing to die for this purpose because it is that meaningful to me. And he refused to take that phrase out of his speech. And his attorneys begged and begged and begged. So what he agreed to do is he added the phrase need be. So if need be that I need to die, I'm willing to do it. But that's how you know. When you have a belief or something you're trying to achieve is so meaningful for you that you're willing to pay a high price and make a significant sacrifice for that belief or in pursuit of the thing that is meaningful to you. I think sometimes it's hard to determine what we need to hold firm to. And I think all of us have been in situations where it's like, I believe in this so much, I'm not going to change. I'm going to push against the forces in my life that are trying to get me to change. I'm going to hold firm to what my belief system is. I'm going to continue to pursue that goal or that outcome that I want. And when it's that meaningful to you, it is always, always, always worthwhile. So think about those things in your life that matter to you so much that you're willing to pay a price, a high price, to achieve it. Think about those beliefs you have that are so important that you're willing to do anything to hold on to them. Because those are the things that are at the core of who you are. Thank you for being here today. Please do me a huge favor and share this podcast on your social media platforms or with at least one person that you think could benefit from hearing this message today. And don't forget to subscribe to this podcast. You can do that on Apple Podcasts and Spotify and all of the places where you consume your podcasts. And thank you for being here. I can't wait to see you tomorrow. As we continue to talk about change and the importance of accepting change and being flexible and being able to navigate a world where things are constantly changing, today I'm going to talk about a movie that I think does a great job of demonstrating the importance of change, how hard it is to accept change, and then what typically happens on the other side of change. I want to welcome you back to the Aha Moments. Of course, I'm your host, Elliott Connie, a psychotherapist who likes to use the lessons I've learned in my work and in my life to help you live your very best life. And today I'm super excited because I'm going to talk to you about two things I really enjoy: Marvel and movies. Because one of the movies I saw recently that does such a great job of demonstrating change and how change can be is a movie I saw recently called Spider-Man. Now, Spider-Man is, I love the whole Marvel series, to be very honest with you. And one of the things that's so cool about Spider-Man, it features this thing in the story arc process that's known as the reluctant hero. And the reluctant hero is exactly as it sounds. It's a hero that's kind of forced into being a hero and not by choice did become a hero. And if you've watched this series, the most recent Marvel movie is actually the third one in the series. And in the first one, you see that he's not looking to become a superhero. He just wants to be normal And he's having a difficult time accepting that he's now got these superhero powers, and these superhero powers come along with responsibility. And in the second movie, which is where I think this demonstration of change and accepting change shows up most, is wrestling with the idea that he could be accepted and become an Avenger. And become one of on the team of people as an Avenger and trying to become an Avenger. And then there's this scene where I think at this point I have to worry about giving away too many spoilers. There's this scene where he's trying to impress Tony Stark, who's like the leader of the Avengers, and he upsets him and Tony Stark takes his suit away. And he says, "Without that suit, I have nothing." And the movie's about him discovering himself and becoming who he needs to become and evolving. You know, change is often evolution, even though it's almost always uncomfortable. We have to find it within ourselves to allow ourselves to evolve and become the person that we need to be. And to be honest with you, I think that's what the Spider-Man series and the Marvel movies is all about. It's about evolution. It's about stepping into your real world. It's about becoming who you were intending to become. It's about growth. A lot of times people become stagnant and they stop growing simply because the growth process is uncomfortable. They don't just call it growing pains for no reason. It really, really is hard to deal with. Change is complicated, uncomfortable, causes pain, causes disruption. And it's funny, you watch the Spider-Man movies and there's constant disruption happening. And he's reluctant about it. Like the second movie, which is called Far From Home, it's about Spider-Man going on a trip to Europe. And all he wants is to kiss the girl he has a crush on, but he has to instead save the world. And sometimes we have to step into the save the world version of ourselves. Sometimes we have to do something challenging because our circumstances around us have changed and we need to step into the new version of ourselves. And that's the magic, I think, of the human experience. I think that's what makes the human experience beautiful, for when we can be strong enough and bold enough and courageous enough to step into our new world and become what we need to become. So you know what I want you to do? I want you to think of a movie that shows the arc of someone go from average normal person, and through the movie they have to become a different version of themselves to accomplish something. And I want you to sit and watch that movie with that in your mind. Thank you so much for being here today. If you wouldn't mind, please do me a super huge favor and share this podcast on your social media platforms, or with at least one person that you think could benefit from hearing this message today. And please subscribe to this podcast. You can do that on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Anchor, whatever, wherever you listen to your podcast. And I can't wait to see you tomorrow. Sometimes the changes that happen around us. They happen with us not even noticing it. And those changes are often pointed out to us, the people around us that are pleased with us or notice something or pointed out to us in some sort of a way. And those changes can be super duper important. And that's going to be the focus of today's episode. And I want to thank you guys for being here. Now, of course, I'm your host, Elliott Connie. And I want to welcome you back to the aha moments where every day I share the lessons I've learned in my work as a psychotherapist and in my life to inspire you to live your very best life. And today, that's exactly what I want to do as we talk about change, but the changes that happen naturally just around us that people see. And I'm going to talk to you about a friend of mine when I was growing up. This is a young man named John. John was my younger brother's best friend, but he was one of my friends too. And John he was the kind of kid that was just kind of everywhere. Like you wouldn't describe this kid as dependable. You wouldn't describe John when we were growing up as, he got in a lot of trouble. Like I'm trying to describe him as mischievous, but he wasn't bad or anything like that. But immature would be a good way to describe John. And then one day, my brother and I went to go visit John, which we loved to do. He lived in an apartment complex that had a pool. We did not have a pool, and it was so cool when we got to go to John's house to play in his pool. Now, we were at the age around this time when you could get around Boston on your bike, and it was just a cool time in Boston. But he lives far enough away that I needed to ride with my parents, or from my parents. So it was a good treat when my brother and I could go visit John. So this one day we were over at his apartment swimming in his pool. I'll never forget that day. we're in the pool, frolicking around, playing, and doing whatever it is we're doing. And this other kid came running and jumped in the pool. And it became very clear to us that this other kid was struggling and then, in fact, drowning. Now, I'm looking from the other side of the pool at this, and as I notice this happening, John jumps in, swims to the kid, and pulls him to safety, and begins doing, CPR. Begins to do CPR on this kid. John had learned CPR as a Cub Scout, maybe like a year before. Like, this wasn't some sort of a thing that John does often or was, super great at or anything like that. But he obviously knew how to do it, and he obviously employed it in a way that was effective because it saved this young kid's life. I remember how proud the parents were with John. Underneath their noses, he had turned into this kid that was capable of doing such a profound thing. It was almost like underneath their noses, he'd become this person all of a sudden capable of doing such a selfless thing. And it wasn't like they saw it coming. And from that point forward, there was a much more kind of mature presence to John. There was a much more, there was a thing about him, like a pride he carried and a pride his parents had of him. But it came out of nowhere a bit, because he just somehow, over the course of time, turned into the type of person that was capable of doing such a profound thing. Now, I never forgot that moment. And I remember John's dad came down to the pool, and somebody told him what had happened. And he was just so proud of his son. And I just never forgot that look. Because sometimes we just kind of grow. And the journey of life just takes us to a place where we become capable of doing something that we weren't capable of before. It was special. John really is a special man. He grew up to become a special man and is a special person. But I think that was the first moment where he felt it. And nobody saw it coming. It was just this flourishing of John that had happened. So I want to encourage you to think about the journey you've had on your life and what are some of the changes that happened. And when was the moment that you started noticing and someone else started noticing that you had evolved into a newer version of yourself that was actually quite pleasing to people. Thank you so much for being here today. If you wouldn't mind, please share this podcast on your social media platforms or with at least one person that you think could benefit from hearing this message today. And please don't forget to subscribe to this podcast. You can do that on Apple Podcasts or wherever you listen to your podcast. And I will see you on Monday with a whole new topic.